Hey everyone, we're going to get started. Hi, for everyone who's new, I'm Valerie. I'm the program coordinator, and we're so excited to have all of you here. This is just our second meeting of the year, so it's great to see so many new people. We're going to hear today from Dr. Mary Lou, as usual, and she's going to give us some valuable insights on how we can learn to be better learners. So I'll turn it over to her.
I am really excited about this lecture today because I think the mind is one of our most treasured gifts. The mind. In fact, brain research is just beginning to develop, and we're learning all kinds of things about the intricacies of the mind. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and how the mind affects us as we learn, as we study. I would suggest that you all take paper and pen from the center of the table, because there's a lot of information in this lecture, and you won't be able to do the discussion very well if you can't remember some of the things that we're saying. So we put paper and pencil in the front of the table, in the middle of the table, and if you can get that, then we'll be ready to go. Because this is such a vast topic, I'm going to focus on four areas that we're going to look at as we explore how to maximize the mind. The first will be brain research. We could take hours on this, but I'm going to give a summary of some of the things of brain research that are going to help you as a student and someone who's going to be a learner. The second one is how to maximize your pleasure and learning as a student. I think that's very important. So we're going to talk about that from a Hungarian psychologist, how to maximize your pleasure in learning as a student. The third, how to read efficiently. All of you who are studying in a second language need to know how to make the best use of your time and not get overwhelmed with every single word in the text. So we're going to talk about how to read efficiently. And then the fourth one is we're going to talk about how to think analytically. So here are our four areas. Each of them could be an hour apiece. I'm trying to condense it all in 15 minutes. That's why you need to take notes. Okay, so here we go. Brain research. The area we're going to talk about in brain research this morning is neoplasticity. You notice inside that word is the word plastic. When you're learning English words, try and find words inside them, because that will give you a clue as to their meaning. Plastic. Neoplasticity is the science of change. We've discovered from brain research, or the people in brain research have discovered, that the brain is actually very flexible. That you can actually train your brain, you can rewire your brain. The brain is not just a static piece of amazing equipment God has given, but it is very flexible. And so we need to understand what it means to rewire the brain. As a student, you're learning new things all the time, and you will be actually trying to rewire your brain. We are using graphics in this lecture because a picture is worth 1,000 words. And we chose this particular graphic because it may seem a little daunting to rewire your brain, but that is what is possible, and that's what we're going to be talking about. How do you do that? To understand that, we go to what the brain is made of. And this is not new information, I hope, for anybody here. There are two hemispheres in the brain. One is the right hemisphere. That's the creative side of every person. That's the side where our connections are made. That's where our memory bank is from all the associations of the past. This is where our self-talk is. This is where our emotions are based. This is where we make connection with people, the right side of the brain. And you'll see in the graphic the various aspects of color and rhythm, All the artists are strong in the right side of their brain, and the world will be a very dull place without people who are maximizing the right side of their brain. Students focus on the left side of the brain. That's how we make sense of facts. That's where you'll do your critical thinking, usually linear thinking. People who are involved in computer science are right brain, left brain people. They're looking at things that are easy to understand from a very physical place. They are doing very clear linear thinking. What I want to emphasize this morning, particularly for students, but this lecture is applicable for all of us, is that we need to be using and maximizing both sides of the brain. If we want to be growing in our mind, and that's part of maturity, that's part of what you want to do as a student, you want to be expanding your mind. If we want to be doing that, it's going to take both hemispheres of the brain that you are working on together if you want to rewire your brain as a student. We're going to come back to that. What's so interesting about the mind is, and of course the brain is in the mind, is that it's embedded in our physical being. As a student, this may be something we're not remembering. The brain is also relational, so what I'm learning, I am tying in with somebody else. I'm affected by other people. It's relational. And as we are thinking and growing in our mind, there are electrochemical impulses that are firing in our brain, and these are the things that are going to help us rewire our brain. As you're learning new material, you're going to be rewiring your brain. Now let me go to this issue of the brain related to the mind and the body. One thing that's very important to understand as a student is that we need to exercise. Physically exercise. So all the brain researchers say you need to have some kind of aerobic activity for 15 minutes, 5 days a week. Often as we begin to get really involved in our studies, exercise is one of the first things we drop. That's not a good idea. The brain will be stimulated when your body is feeling good because of exercise. Also, as we're trying to maximize our mind, it is very important that we are coordinating, we're bringing together both the left and the right brain. Now, I want to give you a couple of cautions, particularly as a student. I have 3 advanced degrees. I understand what it means to be a student. Here's the first one, and notice the graph. The brain gets tired. And so brain researchers say there is a dramatic drop-off of what you can retain after an hour or 2. Now that has all kinds of implications for how we study, for our study patterns. And so what researchers are saying is that you need to read a book. Some of you have extensive reading assignments as students. You need to read a book in 1 or 2 hours at a session, and then stop. Do something aerobic. Do something different. Give your brain a chance to rest. The brain actually gets tired. So that's going to be a very important caution. Secondly, and this goes back to the understanding of both left brain and right brain, we need to attend to ourselves as a whole person. And one of the things that I want to submit today is that none of us who have been students and are students are a left brain study machine. Your studies and the effectiveness of your studies are going to be deliberately tied in to your emotions. Interestingly enough, it is not just the information you're trying to process in your brain. You're a right and left brain person as a whole person, so you've got to be integrating those two things. That means that you need to deal with whatever is happening in your life beside your studies. Because emotions drain our energy. If there's an area you're troubled about, if there's a relationship that is not going well, if there's some concern you have about the future, if there's something you're angry about, that is going to affect actually you as a student. It's going to, and as another adult who is not a student right now. All these things tie together. So we need to be dealing with our issues. Then, I don't know, how many of you have done an all-nighter as a student? How many of you stayed up all night and studied and read, and whether you're a student or not, and cramped on your studies? Yeah, that's right. It's good to be honest, right? All right. Now this is a problem. This is a problem. Remember the research that your brain gets tired and you are going to be less and less and less effective the more you just stay and crank. That's what we say in English. The more you just stay and work on it. Doing an all-nighter is not wise. We have a wonderful little graphic here. And what you do as an all-nighter is you usually get some sort of caffeine stimulation, right? I don't know how many cups of coffee you may drink if you're trying to do an all-nighter, but eventually the body is not going to do very well. And the mind won't do very well either. So it is counterproductive to do an all-nighter. That means that we need to be very disciplined as people. So we are not suddenly in the place where our major test is due the next morning, a major research project is due the next morning, and we are suddenly feeling behind and feel we have to stay up all night. We need to monitor our time. Caution to all students. I want to talk about another area of caution. One of the wonderful things, I think, about rewiring your brain is the power of negative thoughts. If you were honest right now, and I don't expect this out loud, you can think of some thought, and I have several of them down on the screen, that are really not going to be helpful for you. They are negative thoughts. And negative thoughts, if they have been going on in our mind for a while, are like tapes. They're like tapes that keep getting replayed in your mind. If you have ever been in this country or your own country and you've been in a place where there's a lot of rain or even snow, then you can see ruts in the road that get created by that rain. Those ruts are what you are creating in your own mind. They're the pathways by your thoughts. Now, if our thoughts are negative, they're going to be very difficult. I know some of us have come from a background that says you've got to be perfect. You've got to ace everything you're doing as a student. Your parents have sent you here. Your professors have sent you here. The expectations are up here, and you've got to meet all those expectations. Now, the problem with that is you're not going to do it. There's nobody in this room that's perfect. Nobody. And if that's your standard, then you're always going to be a failure in your own eyes. That's not good. You are not a failure. We just need to change our standard. Maybe we think, as a student, particularly if you're working in a second culture, that this book or course or assignment is too hard. I can't understand it. Therefore, I'm not as smart as the other students. And you begin this comparison. That is not wise. That's negative. You don't want to do that, and it's going to cause you a lot of stress. Of course you can do what you've come to do. Get help. Get a tutor. Get a mentor. Work with other people. You can do it. But the I can't is a negative tape. And many adults who are not students anymore still have very powerful negative tapes in their mind. We could think we're going to fail a course, but that's a defeatist attitude. You do not need to fail. We're all here to help. All of you who are working in a second language, many of us can help you with your papers. We can help you in all kinds of ways. You're not going to fail. We're here to work together with you, so that's fine. What I want to just help us understand, and you'll know in your own mind, what are the thoughts that keep going through your mind that are actually tearing you down, not building you up. Those are negative tapes. They create pathways in your mind so that when something comes into your experience, your brain is going to automatically go down those pathways unless you change how you think. And that is possible. We'll get back to that at the end. Okay, so that's brain research. Number one. Now we're going to number two. And this is from one of my favorite psychologists from Hungary, Csikszentmihalyi from Hungary. He was a professor at University of Chicago, and he did a lot of his research right here in Chicago. He's world-renowned. He has written a book called Flow, the Optimal Experience, what each of us need to get to as an adult, not just a student. Creativity is another one of his books. And he has discovered that if you get to a place where you have clear goals, you should have clear goals even as a student, but absolutely as an older adult, challenges that are well matched to your skills, discipline, concentration so your mind isn't going all over the place, and an absorption in what you're doing, there will be a release of psychic energy and a sense of well-being and a sense of strength. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's the way to live. So that you're on the positive side of psychic energy, not energy that's tearing you down, but that's building you up, and that is part of your well-being and your strength. Flow, we call it. He calls it. This past summer, I felt led to write a book, which I've just about completed, and it's on the Christian life, but the issue that I discovered as I was writing this book, sometimes I would get thoughts as I'm lying down and getting ready to go to sleep, and thoughts would come, I'd get up and I'd start writing. I was in flow. There was enormous energy that I had. There was a great sense of delight in what I was doing. And there was strength, and that can mark us as a student or as an adult in anything that we do. Now, one of the ways that I think we can get to flow is what I would call an aha. First of all, you want to recognize when you are in flow. Notice what really turns you on as a student. I'm talking now particularly to the students, but that's true for older adults. Notice what energizes you, because you should stay in that pathway. As a student, you want to read for an aha. How many of you have heard of an aha before? Okay, good. An aha, let me say it the way you say it in English. Aha. Aha. An aha is when a light goes on in your brain. And you recognize that there's something that's just clicked for you. Something that's made sense. Some kind of new insight. Something you've been working for. An aha. I love ahas. And I love to hear somebody else's aha. I've taught, of course, at the grad level, and what I look for is how fresh the student's material is. Do they have ahas? Or are they just giving back the material with no originality and creativity? You want an aha. When you work from your ahas, then you will have more originality. You will have more creativity. You will have more psychic energy because it's very fun to be in a place where you're learning and growing. And so my suggestion to all of our students is that you feature your ahas in your writing, in your research. If you're doing a PhD dissertation, it has got to be something you're excited about. It's got to be some new field. If you're doing a case as a lawyer, you have to be able to make it well presented. There should be something that you find that's convincing, that's an aha. Work from your ahas. Write about them, develop them, think about them. That's part of the pleasure of a student. That's 2. We go to number 3. How do you read efficiently? I want to tell you, you do not need to read every word of every textbook you're responsible to have an understanding of. You do not need to read every word. And particularly if you're working in a second language, this is going to slow you down amazingly, and you're going to be behind the other students because you're working so hard at every single word. So what you want to do is, first, you look at every section heading in the chapter or the book. You read the first and the last sentence of every paragraph. We call this skimming.
Yes.
You find the material that seems most relevant to what your assignment is, what you're looking for, and you concentrate on those paragraphs. You look at the graphs and pictures because they're there to communicate, and often this idea that a picture is worth 1,000 words will be very helpful for you. You're reading to discover. You want to discover what the author of the book has as an assumption. Everybody thinks from assumptions. We all have assumptions about how we think the world works or whatever it is that is the field that you're looking at. We have assumptions. And you want to figure out what those assumptions are. As a lawyer, some of you are in a grad law school. This is extremely important for you. You're going to want to understand the main points, the arguments, if there's evidence for those arguments, the conclusions, and you want to write it down. You want to be taking notes. I'm old-fashioned enough that I really like paper in front of me rather than a computer screen because I can mark up a text. And then I can go back where my notes are, where I've marked up, where I've underlined, and I go back over my highlighted materials, and that's what I focus on as I begin to review. Reading efficiently. You're going to want to talk about it, you're going to want to review it, and you're going to want to review it out loud. Why out loud? Because it will keep your mind focused. If you just are trying to think about it quietly, your mind's going to start getting distracted. So you want to do it out loud. When I was working on my PhD, I had an integrated PhD, which meant I had 4 separate fields that were being combined in my PhD. That meant I had 4 separate exams, 1 in each field, in a 5-day period when I sat for my final exams. That's a lot of material. And so, okay, I needed a plan. The first day, actually, and this is just very fun, the first day after I took my first exam, I came out, it was summer, I laid on the ground, stretched out, and I went, God, I don't think I can do the other 3. I was just exhausted. But what I had done was what helped me. It was summer. We lived up in Evanston because I had my degree from Northwestern Evanston, and the lake is there. So I worked on my material at home, and then I went to the lake, put on my bathing suit, went out, waded out, so I was far enough away from the other swimmers, and I began to talk out loud. I began to review out loud everything I needed for that particular exam the next day. And then when that was finished, I did it for the next day. Do it out loud. Rehearse it. Review is one of the ways the brain gets rewired. So you need to review and review. That's 3. The last one. Learn how to think critically. All of you who are coming in to studies in the United States from other cultures may be discovering that you are expected to talk in class. You're expected to ask questions. That is not disrespectful to the professor. You're expected to participate. You are expected to think critically. Doesn't matter how good your English is, you just need to do it. And so, thinking critically is developing your skills. And it's training, here's this rewiring idea again, it's training your mind to rethink, reorganize, restructure, reconstruct itself in new neurological pathways. Thinking critically. Let me give you a simple little acrostic. Think red. Think red. We think red when we first of all look at material and we recognize, that's the R, recognize assumptions. You're going to want to do that. For a lawyer, it's huge. You've got to know the assumptions of a case you're looking at. Then you want to E, evaluate. You want to evaluate, and this will be true for fiction, it's true for almost any text you have. Evaluate the arguments, the story, whatever is being presented for you. Evaluate them. And then draw your own conclusions. What's strong? What's weak? You want to ask that in terms of yourself, in terms of how the author has done what they've done. And then you want to try and defend, yes or no, why you think they have done a good job or they haven't done a good job. Now, in the work world, this works as well, right? In our projects, what we're doing in the work world, we still need these same skills. Then, after you have done this evaluation, you need to come up with an alternative that's creative. You need to come up with a solution. If you're going to defend the author, that's fine. Of course, you have to say why. If you are not, if you think that this person is making assumptions or saying things that you don't agree with, of course you have to say why. And it's better if you can say, what alternative is there? This is where your aha will work. And if you're a student, professors look for originality. They look for where you're learning. They look for the aha. So use it. And in the business world as well, if you're going to go forward in business, you want to be showing that you're able to think really creatively. You might want to engage in your mind or in a discussion group with your classmates with a dialogue with the author. What questions would you ask the author? What answers do you think the author would give? The graphic shows that what we're doing is we're asking questions. This is part of thinking critically. We don't just accept what we hear. No thinking person just accepts what they hear. You're going to ask questions, then you're going to get your brain engaged, and you're going to start working through the issues in your brain. Very important. This is not lazy. You can't be lazy if you're going to grow as a person in your mind. You really do need to be thinking. And at that point, you hope a light goes on. Because of all this process, you hope a light goes on. So there are the 4 areas. I want to close with something that I think is the key to all this in my own life, and most of us who are Christians here would agree with this. I think as a student and as a person, if you're concerned about your mind and how your brain works, you need to ask God first. for help. God is the one who's made our minds. God is the source of all wisdom. And I'll explain that very briefly from my own story, but this may help those of you who are not Christians. The Bible says that God is explained in terms of three different aspects of his character. The Father, who's the Creator, the Son, Jesus Christ, who was sent to incarnate, to show in a human form what God is like, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, the reason why that's important is that if you want to connect with God in your mind, it takes a relationship with God if you want to tap into God's wisdom. And I'd like to submit that God's wisdom is going to exceed anybody's wisdom in this room. And those of us who have experienced this can say, yes, that's true. That's true. And it's the Holy Spirit who comes to live in a Christian, connects that person then to God, and gives us the ability to understand God's thoughts, to understand God's wisdom. Before I became a Christian, I don't come from a Christian background. The Bible made no sense to me whatsoever. I thought there were fairy tales and myths, and I didn't agree with a number of things that the Bible said. And so I almost didn't become a Christian. That's another story from another time. But what I did do when I made that experiment with God, that's part of my story that I've told before, is that I asked God if he was really real and this Bible had any truth at all, to try and show me if that was true. And in the process, the Holy Spirit began to create understanding for me. And I began to understand the Bible in a way I never had before, once I had this relationship with God. Practically, that worked out. I was in college at the time. I was doing a senior honors thesis on John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. Some of you have read that book. It's a wonderful allegory of the Christian life. I'm in a secular college, and I'm reading this book for my honors thesis. And what I discovered was God kept giving me insights into what the author was trying to say. So much so that my secular professors said to me, "Mary Lou, where are you getting this stuff? We've read this book and we haven't seen any of these things." Well, it wasn't that I was smarter than they were. It's that I was connected to a source of resource, to a source of wisdom they didn't have. And that's how I've done all my degrees. Asking God for his wisdom as I work through all the research. Asking God to find the right resources. Asking God for ways to think, how to do these papers, all the things that are involved. And in that process, when I did my PhD, I still had a job. I still was in Christian ministry, and I still was keeping up all my relationships. Of course, I was married, I have children, and I was doing all of that. So my right and left brain were constantly being stimulated together. I was not a left brain study machine. But God had made all this possible. It starts with a relationship with Jesus Christ. If you want your mind maximized, my suggestion is you go to the one who created your mind. And we believe that that is God. And God can open up our mind. There's a great commandment that the Bible gives us, and it is to love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. That's been my basis of living since I became a Christian. And I am not having to do reruns of old things. God is always, always bringing fresh material, even as I study the Bible. It is wonderful. I recommend a relationship with God and Jesus Christ if you want to maximize your mind. Now let's get to our materials. We have discussion questions written out for you, and we're going to be looking at these issues. How can you learn to think analytically? How can you maximize your reading? How can you find pleasure? If you'll take those questions that are in the middle of the table and your own papers, we'll have this discussion right now. Thank you.